Hello everyone, with this episode I like to introduce a video game and their relationship with phenomenology, specific with our habits of living. I tackle on video games because I'm a fan, I like to play, and because I research video games as a terrain of investigation. In this specific case I like to introduce Exit A. The video game is interesting here because it can be a fertile terrain for investigating habits of living and spaces which are considered liminal spaces, so spaces which are in between things that we have done and we are going to do. Subways, trains, airplanes, airports. So I will unpack this aspect thanks to the insight of Michel Foucault. So Exit A is a Japanese video game set in which we are required to pass through some corridors of the subways, contemporary subways of Japan. This is exciting for me because I've been in Japan many times. I have crossed same identical spaces which I've seen in the video game. The peculiarity of the video game is that you are crossing a corridor and you need to pay attention to every little details of the space. If there are differences, the idea is that if you are able to pass through a series of corridors which is supposed to be identical but have always differences, then you will finish the game and you actually get out. In the other case, you always reset to the beginning of the game and therefore you never get out of your subway in an infinite loop. The subway are transitional spaces, spaces which are designed for us for going somewhere. Therefore, in a certain way, the design of the space is already somehow functional. And the functionality of the space let us be somewhat inattentive to the space. As you may remember in the previous episode, I was talking about threshold of attentions. And those kind of spaces are designed for being a place of inattentiveness. The only attention required sometimes are the sign or some sound. But in reality, because of the quantity of people, light, and perhaps noises you encounter in those spaces are tending to let us feel inattentive because we are trying to somehow zero out our attention to too many noises or too many things that can disturb us. So subways are liminal spaces, and many of these urban spaces are designed in a way that tend us to have a relationship with them which is inattentive, functional, and performative. Performative to say that we are performing the same number of gestures, routines. I enter from the entrance of the subway, then I need to tap in the gates, you need to go down from an escalator, and then I get to the platform for waiting the train. And then in reverse, I do all the same routine and gestures to get out of the subway. And this is very true for many other occasions. We go to the airport, we need to do a number of things which are always the same. So those kind of spaces are spaces for performative gestures, things that we do always in a routinary form. Michel Foucault introduced an idea about spaces which are in between, spaces which are liminal, which he calls heterotopic spaces. Michel Foucault says the definition of heterotopias are spaces that exhibit dual meanings, with several places for the affirmation of difference, but also as a means to escape from authoritarianism and repressions. An ambiguous and ambivalent space of elsewhere, a collection of differences, intermezzo, between utopian and dystopian spaces. This idea comes from the fact that all the spaces which are standing in between something else are spaces which somehow escaping the idea of the affirmed space of actions. So every space is somewhat becomes functional. They also have the prerogative to be a space in which something unexpected can happen. Now in Exit A, this is very evident because the very fact that you must pay attention to some details is counterintuitive. It obliges you somehow to force you to pay attention to the space which is not designed itself to pay attention to. And this is quite interesting because it opens up a space into in-between space which now have new qualities that which you never thought about it. Imagine when you have a functional use of objects and tools. Usually we don't think that hammer should work, but we will notice immediately the lack of functionality of the hammer when your hammer broke. And suddenly we realize that the object itself opened up a new aspect of its own existence. When Michel Foucault talks about heterotopic space, ambiguous and ambivalent space of elsewhere. So the space of elsewhere is a space that puts itself in between things and somewhere else from the usual way of seeing things. In fact, we could say that the same ambiguous space is when we suddenly go for a trip in some new unknown country. This is a space elsewhere because it stands out from our usual routines, and suddenly we see ourselves in a very different manner. So the idea of in-betweenness, they recur as a space which is ambiguous, which can lead, as Michel Foucault was saying, to utopian or to dystopian. Looking back at the subway, is utopia the moment I pass through the corridor and I survive. It becomes dystopia when suddenly, by not paying attention to details, I encounter also supernatural occurrences. When we're looking back at the video game Exit 8, we notice those transitional spaces are not anymore only performative, that the very fact that we are required to pay attention to the space let us rethink and reframe the way we consider public spaces. And this brings us back to the sentence of Michel Foucault. Those places are also means of escape from authoritarianism and repression, because in fact the very space which has been designed from outside, from the outset, for to be functional. The very moment we rethink urban spaces, their function and their design, we also rethink our relationship with the society and we rethink how we want to shape them. We take autonomy and we take agency in this relationship. I hope you liked this episode. Please leave a comment.